Hello, everybody. It's 1:59 p.m. Eastern. We are going to start exactly at 2 p.m. So we're going to give you all a chance to join and get situated, and then we'll begin. All right. It is now 2 p.m. Monique, shall we start?
Yes. Thank you, Shira.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Welcome to the AIAA ITSA Partner Webinar on Advanced Air Mobility's Contributions to Multimodal Solutions. My name is Ashira Butler-Green, and I am Senior Manager of Aeronautics at AIAA. AIAA's behind-the-scenes team today includes Monique Alabi, our Zoom mistress, alongside Jim Sherman and Jessica Statler. After this introduction, I will hop off camera and work in the background with my colleagues to ensure that this webinar moves smoothly. We appreciate ITS America's willingness to work with us on developing this inaugural AAM multimodal focus program, and hope that everyone in attendance finds it useful and interesting. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and shared publicly afterwards. AIAA's mission is to support the aerospace industry as it envisions the future. We are passionate about the future of aerospace, and at the same time, our organization is not prescriptive about the shape of that future. We are committed to sharing visions of possible futures and advances in research, development, and implementation pathways to enable the realizations of that future. Our purpose is educational in nature. Our advocacy goals are to ensure that the aerospace industry has a future and that individuals passionate about shaping that future are supported throughout their careers through professional development, convenings, and networking opportunities. We are fortunate that our members include many technical experts involved in aerospace across aviation, space, and related functions. Our speakers for today, in order of presentation, will be Husni Idris, Trey Tillander, and Tombo Jones. Vishwanath Balusu is our moderator and will also provide some introductory remarks and later lead the Q&A. Each panelist is speaking on behalf of their own experience and expertise, but not necessarily as a representative of their organization. During the webinar, we will disable the chat function and direct questions via the Q&A. Anonymous questions will not be permitted. At the end of the webinar, I will be back on camera and make a few announcements. Thank you again. And now I would like to hand the mic, as it were, over to Bobby McCurdy, Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at ITS America. Over to you, Bobby.
Thank you, Ashira. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the introduction. Bobby McCurdy with ITS America, representing the various members of our team who are contributing to this webinar, including, I know that I'm joined here by Aaron Banton and a variety of people from our office, so thank you all for being here with me. I'm here representing ITS America, where we strive to be the leading voice advocating for the scaled deployment of innovative transportation technology through policy, thought leadership, and developing the transportation workforce of the future. Our members include private sector innovators, public sector deployers, and leading research and academic institutions. At ITS America, we see advanced air mobility as a critical layer in an integrated multimodal transportation system. AAM can support the movement of people and goods in ways that are safer, more efficient, and more connected to the communities we serve. Our AAM working group brings together public agencies, industry leaders, and researchers to evaluate how state and local communities can plan and prepare for AAM integration. The working group develops guidelines, standards, and best practices for the safe and efficient integration of AAM into existing transportation systems. Our goal is to explore how advanced air mobility can be planned and deployed safely to improve efficiency and interoperability. At ITS America, we're focused on helping state and local communities prepare for advanced air mobility through guidance on infrastructure, policy, and operational readiness. Through our use case library, we are tracking use cases where advanced air mobility can enhance emergency response, disaster recovery, and cargo delivery. These use cases demonstrate how AAM is being piloted in ways that complement ground transportation systems. This webinar is part of a broader collaboration between ITS America and AIAA to align our efforts and to amplify best practices across sectors. We're excited to gather experts from NASA, state DOTs, and academia to explore how advanced air mobility can enhance multimodal planning. We invite you to contribute to our use case library, join our AAM working group sessions, and help shape policies that will define the future of advanced air mobility within intelligent transportation systems. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to a robust discussion on the possibility for advanced air mobility's contributions to multimodal solutions. Thanks, everybody, and I will hand it on back.
Okay. Vishwa, you're on.
Hey everyone, good afternoon, good morning on the West Coast. Welcome to this webinar. It's been a long time in the making and we're finally here on AM contributions to multimodal solutions. My name is Vishwa. I'm a senior aerospace scientist with Crown Innovations, Inc. I'll be running the panel today. Let me start off with a little example I like to give people to sort of frame what we are trying to get after. So when you order, for example, a package and you pay a shipping fee, that fee includes how that package moves on a little van, then on a truck, then on a plane, then on a ship maybe, and again on the truck on the other end, another van, and then to your doorstep. Someone decides how that money splits between these 6 different modes, right? But when you fly as a passenger, the airlines, the aviation industry operates in a more gate-to-gate fashion. But for you, on a personal basis, you are still taking a door-to-door trip. So this is sort of an very simple example of our motivation of how can we think of aviation in a more door-to-door fashion, especially for passengers and also for cargo. And AAM technologies have sort of made it more possible now to think of this in a more door-to-door setting. Aviation and other modes in general typically operate in a very siloed fashion, and therefore this effort between AIAA and ITS America is to focus on how aviation can become more integrated. So with that framing of the background, let me introduce you to today's panel and the whole discussion that we'll have over the next hour. A few bookkeeping things quickly, just in terms of the run of the show. We'll go through each of the panelists and they'll have 12 to 15 minutes of presentation. And then we'll get into Q&A. Please post your questions, as said earlier, on the Q&A, and we can bring them up as needed in the order. With that, let me start off first. So the 3 panelists we have today are Husni Idris, who's a research aerospace engineer at NASA Ames. We have Trey Tillander, who is the Director of Transportation Technology at Florida DOT. And we also have Tombo Jones, who is the Director of the Virginia Tech Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership. With that, let me start off with Husni. So Dr. Idris he's joined the Aviation Systems Division at NASA in Moffett Field in 2017. His career spans across contributions across all academia, industry, and government, from International Center of Air Transportation at MIT to a senior researcher at Agility Corporation, leading all the way to joining NASA. Husni has worn many hats over the years, and I'm sure a lot of you have met him and know about his work. The one which he is wearing right now, especially with respect to this webinar, is he's the chair of the AAM Multimodal Working Group, which he started at AIAA. So with that hat, Husni, let me pass it on to you to take us through it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vishwa. Thank you for the introduction. So like Vishwa said, I'm with NASA Ames, but I am talking here on behalf of AIAA. So I represent kind of the AIAA part of the panel. I'll talk about, do you want to go to the maybe the title slide there? I'll talk about some of the activities that the AIAA has undergone and I've been leading the last 2 to 3 years in attempting to help integrate AAM in the total multimodal system. I'll also mention a few things about some research I've been leading in my job at NASA, incubating what we been calling passenger-oriented total mobility, which has the same goal of integrating aviation and AM door-to-door, as Vishwa mentioned. So the next slide, I'll start by mentioning a few things about the AIAA. So I spent all my career actually on the aviation side, particularly focusing on automation and autonomy for air traffic management. And a lot of that was on airport operations. And so I had the opportunity working on airport automation to be at the touch point between aviation and the other modes. So as another motivating example to what Vishwa mentioned, let me say that airlines, for example, report on-time performance if they arrive within 15 minutes of their intended time. And that buffer is pretty large because of the uncertainties in the system. And a large part of that uncertainty comes at the gate. So when you push back from the gate, the uncertainty in that, the standard deviation, is about the same order. It's about 12 to 15 minutes. And so if you want to really improve the performance of the system, we have to address where the uncertainties are. And a lot of these uncertainties don't come from when you're in the air. They come from when you are on the ground, doing the turnaround, dealing with the passengers, packages, and so on. And so I've always been advocating that we need to integrate aviation in general with the other modes. This culminated actually in a paper that I published with a good friend of mine, Sarasina Tuchen from the Volpe Center, DOT, in 2019 on the role of aviation in the multimodal system and how we can integrate some of the information across the different modes. Then at AIAA, around the 2021-22, the AIAA stood up a task force to see how AIAA can help move the needle with regard to the AAM. Another good friend of mine, Virginia Stauffer, led that task force, and I've been talking with her about this multimodal integration as part of the Transformational Flight Technical Committee. She invited me to the task force, and I again pitched it there. And as a result, in the AIAA SciTech 2023, the task force recommended that we establish a committee around this topic and asked me to lead it. So I've been leading this for the last 3 years. We started with the steering committee, and the idea was to bring these kind of communities together, including ITSA, Volpe, TRB, academics, industry, around this topic. And also leverage international efforts and such. We kicked off the activity in Aviation 2023 with good participation from multiple organizations, and we developed our vision statement. The vision statement says that AM needs to integrate effectively and seamlessly with the other modes of transportation. And it's really an opportunity with AM. Because AM is going to not only complement but compete with the other options for mobility in an urban and regional environment. And so we really have to look at this system in totality and sort of move from the gate-to-gate paradigm that aviation focused on for a long time to more of a door-to-door, passenger-oriented paradigm, where the passenger is the object that stitches all the modes of transportation together door-to-door. And so to do that, we need to have a kind of new cutting-edge research across the board. We became a working group in 2024, and you can click to the last few bullets here, Jim. We've had a number of activities over the last few years. We had a panel as part of the Forum 360 at Aviation 24, Bridging Roads and Skies. We also started a journal special issue jointly between the AIAA Journal of Air Transportation, the IEEE Transactions on ITS, and the Informs Transportation Science. And this is ongoing. We're hoping to have the virtual issue issued at the end of 2025, but I think we're going to keep this going where we accept submissions as well. In this year's Aviation Forum, we have a workshop and a panel focusing on the using airports as the multimodal hubs. I think Vishwa is going to be leading that. And then we have plans for a number of white papers on taxonomy, barriers, data needs, architecture, and such. So there's an opportunity here to collaborate together on maybe some of these white papers. Next slide. through the and you can click on the picture, Jim, and so through conversations with the panels that we hosted and some of the outreach activities that we conducted also as part of the NASA research that I've been leading, we identified a number of challenges, if you will, for the integration of AAM and how AAM can help the multimodal system. I'm going to use this example. This is Contra Costa County. I apologize for the mistake there in the typo. This is Contra Costa County in the Bay Area. And it's an interesting county. It's mountainous, has mountain in the middle, Diablo Mountain, I think. Has two airports, Buchanan Airport in the yellow dot on the left and Byron Airport on the right. Buchanan is a Class D airspace, I think. It has some operations based on the foggy side of the county. Byron is a rural airport, Class G airspace, used for recreational activities and such. And there are these four towns at the top, Oakley, Antioch, Pittsburgh. They're classified by the county as underserved cities. There was actually a railway shown in the red line that connected them in the past. And then when Highway 4 was built, it created a gap. The railway is not utilized anymore, and there's lots of congestion getting to the highway and on the highway. So here, aviation, or particularly AM, can come in to help alleviate this transportation gap. Can we use it to take people from these cities, for example, to the central part of the county where they can get the BART and the other transit options? Can we build vertiports at Byron versus Buchanan? What are the pluses and minuses? Byron, as you can see here, is not really connected with transit. If you want to get there, you have to take your car. On the lower hand side, you see the other transit options, the buses and such, and Tri-Delta, the green line, it serves that area, but it really doesn't get to Byron. So I just wanted to use this as an example to say that when we introduce AM into the ecosystem, it has to solve these gaps and not exacerbate them. It has to provide equitable access, solve the problem of underutilized infrastructure like rails, underutilized airports, balance the transportation use of the transportation system. We're also going to be facing cultural issues. The aviation has been siloed for a long time from the other modes, and so we have to change culture really to have that conversation. And there's also a mentality, as we've been talking to the transportation authorities, of really careful growth, right? We have environmental issues. We don't want to overload the system. And this is important, but these are some of the things that when we bring a new mode of transportation, we have to deal with. And we also noticed about talking to the experts that there is lack and a gap in the models and metrics. And you can click through, Jim. So we need really metrics to measure the total impact on the system, not only in terms of is there a business case, but what's the impact on these communities? What's the impact on the environment? What's the impact on the economic mobility and accessibility in the system? Next slide. There are probably more challenges than this, but let me say a couple of things about, and you can click through all of this slide, Jim, just for the sake of time. What do we need in terms of solutions? And so we've been brainstorming as part of the NASA Convergent Aeronautics Solutions CAS project, which is a project that allows us researchers at NASA to think outside the box and bring some really challenging problems. And integrating AM into the total system is a very challenging problem. And of course, so we want to do this door-to-door integration across different networks. For the system to be resilient and integrated, we need to deal with seamlessness of the mobility through the transition points, have the network be more dynamic, and how do we leverage autonomy across the network, etc. We have a number of what we call solution vectors, if you will, but there are two things I want to emphasize that we need underlying all of this. We need the data fabric that's at the passenger level. The passenger object is really what connects all the modes together, door to door. And so we need a data fabric that connects aviation and AM with the other modes. And we also need on top of that fabric models that connect the network of networks, if you will, door to door. And we are envisioning a future where this type of passenger data is already actually a lot more available than before and is being leveraged, where we trade off, for example, privacy for utility all the time. Going to the last slide that I have here, Jim, and we'll click through this one by one. So this is an example of a network of network, is what I call it. There's an aviation, let's say AM network. There's a car network. There's a bus network. Could be a ferry network, and so on. And so some of the research areas and things that we need, that we brainstormed as part of this project, we need to integrate what happens on the links, which tends to be traffic management type problem, with what happens in the nodes, which is turnaround type of operations, which deals with fleet allocation, passenger allocation, and so on. One more click, we need to also deal with the seamlessness of the transition of passengers through these nodes to make it seamless and secure. Security is a different level for aviation. And there are already companies like Landline that allow you to use a bus from an airside of an airport to an airside of another airport, ensuring the security on the bus. We have to deal with the different payments that Vishwa mentioned, for example. How do we make all of these things as seamless to the passenger as possible? Couple more clicks, I think. So we need to also have simplified infrastructure, landing and takeoff. For example, we want the takeoff to be as vertical as possible to open up more positions. And this allows us to be more ubiquitous and more integrated with the other modes, and to be able to make that whole topology as dynamic as possible to be resilient to disruptions. And maybe a couple more, so autonomy is going to be a big part of this. We cannot do this network system with a human being centric approach. The vehicles are already autonomous, the cars, the buses, and so on. Airplanes will be autonomous as well. But we need to go to autonomy at the network level as well. We're investigating, for example, AI agents that represent us as people, passengers through the system, and can negotiate autonomously on our behalf, and so on. Also, when we have the pilots of the vehicle, of the planes, we have the drivers of the cars, and so on, we'll have this opportunity to have, I'll do all the clicks, Jim, here, to have the operators in the control room outside of the vehicle supervising multiple vehicles at the same time. And these crews and assets can be shared a lot more between operators. These operators could be public, government, so we have to deal with this heterogeneity between them. How are they going to operate in the same for the same operations? And the same operators might have different objective functions and such. These are just some of the issues and research areas that we've been thinking about at NASA as part, at least, of the CAST project that I mentioned, which really allows us to think outside the box and more futuristic. And I'll be looking forward to discussing this more in the discussion. That's all I have, Vishwa. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Husni. That gives a good framing for the way we are looking at this space, and I mean the new way we are looking at this space. Let me put it that way. So with that, let's move on to our next panelist, who is Trey Tillander. Trey serves as the Florida DOT Executive Director of Transportation Technology. In this role, Trey provides statewide technology leadership for the Florida DOT, including information technology, operation technology, and emerging technology initiatives. He is also responsible for the DOT's Office of Information Technology and Civil Integrated Management, including groups providing statewide leadership in data analytics, GIS, and surveying and mapping. And he also provides strategic leadership in the areas of automated vehicles and data governance. It's very critical that we have Trey here today because he brings that non-aviation, other modes of transportation perspective. And one of the main goals of this webinar and this whole effort is to actually bring people from different fields together to create integrated solutions. So on that note, Trey, let's welcome you and let's hear what Florida DOT is doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Vishwa. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel today. As Vishwa said, I am not an AAM technical expert. So I'm not sure how I got on the panel, Vishwa, but I really appreciate it. However, I am a transportation technology expert, been in that area for many years. And I'm also honored to be starting as the co-chair of ITS America's AAM working group. And that is so hot off the press that we haven't even had a meeting since then, since named. So we're right now working on some revisions and additions to the work plan for that working group. And I really look forward to sharing that with a working group soon. So given that that's in process today, I'm going to talk a little more about Florida's perspective as Vishwa mentioned. And we're going to, focus a little more on the ITS America working group as we get into evolving that working work plan and get into those meetings. For Florida, we're committed to advancing AAM, and we want to do it safely and integrated with our statewide transportation system. We've been engaging with industry experts, airports, the federal transportation agencies, universities, and our OEM and industry partners from all around the world. And we see envisioning AAM as an integration into our existing transportation system and leveraging our multimodal transportation hubs. And this can make a relatively seamless transition from one mode to the next. So I'd like to start with a video that'll give you an overview of some of the strategic AAM work that Florida has already conducted. So we could go to the next slide and play the video.
Advanced Air Mobility, commonly referred to as AAM, brings the latest technology to flight. These aircraft are powered by batteries and electric motors, and most use a combination of rotors and wings, all of which makes them quieter and less costly than fuel-based aircraft. Utilizing vertical takeoff and landing to fly cargo or passengers quickly and efficiently over short distances, these aircraft will operate at existing airports and heliports, but also at standalone facilities known as vertiports. As AAM technology continues to evolve, Florida is leading the nation in creating pathways for this developing mode of transportation.
It's an opportunity to introduce a new mode of transportation to the world to move people and goods.
It's really going to revolutionize transportation as we know it. It's going to really change aviation.
I think AAM is going to transform the way we move around cities, and I think it's going to be really exciting.
We are looking at the cargo medical logistics side of things, as well as working with the military and figuring out how they can incorporate electric aviation into it.
One of the ways we can lead the nation is by bringing thought leaders and industry leaders together to talk about what the future is going to look like.
FDOT has done a tremendous job about pulling together all of these great public and private sector stakeholders.
They are way ahead of where I see anybody else. I mean, the way they're thinking about this, the fact that they're putting together a guidebook and have policies and procedures to implement is fantastic.
We want it to be safe, we want it to be efficient, but at the same time, we want to get to the end results faster than any other transportation provider in the entire world. I'm excited about where we're headed.
For more information, visit our website.
All right, thank you. So let me go a little bit, that's a little bit of where we've been, but I want to kind of go through the timeline over the last few years. We've actually been strategically planning for AAM as far back as 2021. In 2022, we published our first AAM roadmap and started working on vertiport siting standards. And back then in 2022, we completed 32 studies for airports around Florida. And then in 2022, 2023, we kicked off our AAM working group and started statewide meetings. We had several meetings over those 2 years. In that video that showed several scenes from some of those meetings, and you can see that it really brought together a lot of different diverse stakeholders at those groups. And out of that came 18 strategic recommendations from that stakeholder input. And then later in 2023, we launched our implementation and public outreach plan in 3 phases. We also had our first crewed eVTOL flight demonstration at Tampa International Airport that year, so that was very exciting. More recently, in 2024, we started holding tabletop exercises around the state, and we also published our land use and site approval guidebook. And then this year, we released a toolkit kit for local governments. We've really tried to do a lot of outreach to local governments about how to zone and site these vertiports and other infrastructure for AAM. And then currently we are going around the state training local officials and others for vertiport planning. And just last week, we were very excited that Governor DeSantis signed legislation that incorporated advanced air mobility into our regulatory framework and gave us some tools that can help advance the industry across our state. We can go to the next slide. And so what came out of that legislation in concert with it was a plan of action that we developed. And that's really kind of the first phase of the plan of action was getting the tools that we needed in our statutes. We had some AAM language already in there. We had a pretty mature aviation office and many operations going on, but we needed some additional horsepower to keep moving AAM in Florida. And so what that legislation is going to help us to integrate it into our transportation system, enhancing movements, logistics, and emergency response, which is something we're very passionate about in Florida. And we're going to work with public agencies, private industry, academic institutions, and our local communities to prioritize safe, regulatory alignment, and scalable infrastructure so that we can work with our communities to integrate AAM. The next phase is basically working on the structure and operations for AAM across Florida. And the plan, while it's only 7 pages, talks about what actionable items we're going to take. And one of those is looking at corridors and looking at opportunities for AAM aircraft. In Florida, we are very fortunate to have a geography that we feel is favorable. We have 4 large hub airports. 95% of our population is within a 30-minute drive of a public use airport. And we have 21 commercial airports as well as 21 military facilities. And so just about every major aviation and aerospace company has some significant operations in Florida because of these aviation facilities and our military facilities and our spaceport as well down at Cape Canaveral. And then we're going to move into phase 3, which is about expanding SunTrax. SunTrax is our premier transportation technology facility. And in the past, we've focused on intelligent transportation systems, electronic toll collection, connected automated vehicle testing, and then more recently, we've been conducting drone testing, drone training, and again, especially for emergency operations. But what we're excited now through this legislation and through the plan of action is to be launching AAM capabilities at SunTrax. And that will include both physical and digital infrastructure. On the slide there, you can kind of see there's a page in our plan of action focused on SunTrax. It's the second page behind there. And that's a facility located in Central Florida. It's in Auburndale, which is right off of I-4 between Orlando and Tampa. So it's strategically positioned where there's a lot of aviation activities already and will be a great tool for us to continue launching AAM in Florida. And then phase 4 will move into where the infrastructure is ready and we'll move into operations. Overarching amongst all these phases is a really important economic and workforce development need. We want to ensure that we have the right workforce from technicians to pilots to be able to operate eVTOLs and other AAM technology. So we want to support that. And this legislation that was signed last week initiates the Florida's Transportation Research Institute, as well as Florida's Transportation Academy. And that's going to allow us to invest in our workforce at different levels, including custom curriculums at the university level, at the trade school level, and at our state college level. And this is going to support both development in classrooms and hands-on training. And we'll be able to partner on those programs with our universities. Next slide. And so again, I just appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing in Florida and how we're really excited to work with you all, work with our federal partners, other states, to implement a market-driven AAM future for all of us. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion today and really a continued discussion over the next many months. Thank you, Vishwa.
Thank you, Trey. And this gives us a nice background on stuff we'll actually touch upon in the Q&A part of the session to bring in more issues from the non-aviation modes, right? And all that planning in. So moving quickly to Tombo Jones, who is next panelist today. Tombo is the director of the Virginia Tech Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, NFA designated UAS test site. He oversees a growing portfolio of major federal drone integration initiatives and technical research projects, including leading his team in participating in the FAA Beyond and Assure programs. He also serves on the Governor's Aerospace Advisory Council and the Virginia Advanced Air Mobility Alliance. With that, let me introduce Tombo. Tombo, take it away.
Donald, thank you for introducing me, and I'm glad to be here today. So as was stated, I'm the director of one of 7 FAA designated UAS test sites across the nation. We are Virginia Tech employees. Each of these test sites, most of them are at universities. Virginia Tech has a storied history of working in autonomous systems. Certainly our aerospace engineering department. We have an experimental aerial systems laboratory, and even a transportation institute, the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, that has a lot of experience and work in autonomous ground systems. And with the addition of the test site coming about in 2012, I like to think it helps round out some of the research that's being done around autonomous systems. You can see listed here 2 other FAA programs that we at the Virginia Tech Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership are a part of. So in addition to being one of the 7 test sites, we're also part of the FAA Beyond program. The Beyond program was stood up as a continuation of a program before it called the Integration Pilot Program. And they have the same mission set, which is to look at different use cases for conducting autonomous aircraft flights beyond visual line of sight. And our mission sets under that program are package delivery with our partners Wing, linear infrastructure inspection via autonomous systems with our partner Dominion Energy, and then public safety with our partner Customs and Border Protection. The third program there is the FAA Assure program, and that is a program under an office in the FAA that is responsible for research, specifically focused on autonomous systems, and they deliver essentially research objectives to this coalition of universities to perform the research and then report upon the results directly back to the FAA under contract. So what I want to talk to you about today is one of the programs or projects, I should say, that we're working on for the Virginia Department of Aviation. So Trey mentioned a lot of what Florida's done to get ready for advanced air mobility, and Trey, your state's certainly been blazing the way. I've admired quite a bit of y'all's work down there. I'm pretty proud that Virginia has really gotten our act together and started to focus on advanced air mobility. And Virginia, under the leadership of Greg Campbell, the director of the Virginia Department of Aviation, recently published its strategic plan for advanced air mobility. And that plan involves, in this first year, 2 specific projects. One of those is what I'm about to talk about here, which is called Smart Airspace. So the Smart Airspace project was brought about through a partnership with Virginia Tech and a company called Navos NAVOS is a certified instrument approach development company, certified by the FAA to develop instrument approaches. Traditionally, they had done that for helicopters. And what we've partnered here to do is we realized after talking to some different air traffic control organizations or air traffic control experts, as well as talking to some different AAM, advanced air mobility aircraft developers, that this was going to become a problem that we needed to address. So today, commercial flights are generally expected, certainly passenger carrying Part 121 are expected to fly on instrument flight rules. So certainly, these are roads in the sky that have huge value in letting safety of separation services be provided. For example, it lets air traffic controllers know where aircraft are expected to be. It helps them with sequencing aircraft. And also it serves the additional benefit of allowing pilots to perform their mission sets in all weather conditions, certainly in conditions in which they can't see. So like instrument meteorological conditions. We fully expect that in order for advanced air mobility aircraft to carry out their necessary mission set, that they will need to be able to fly in those same type weather conditions, and also for safety reasons will need to be able to fly on route structures that are expected and standardized so that air traffic can manage them appropriately. The problem we're seeing, and the reason that many of these AAM aircraft need newly developed instrument approach procedures and can't use traditional instrument approach procedures, is because some of the aircraft are electrically driven and don't have nearly the range that we see in traditional aircraft. You can go to the next slide. So when we look at traditional instrument procedures, for example, for an airplane that may have different categories based upon the speed at which the airplane performs its approach, most of those approaches are quite long. You can see just an example here of one that's 12 miles long, and then a helicopter approach that's shorter, that's been developed specifically for helicopters, but still approximately 7 miles long. A lot of the advanced air mobility aircraft are the electrically driven ones are looking at a range of about 100 miles. So if they're expected to do an instrument departure and an instrument arrival on an approach that eats up almost 30% of their endurance, that's a problem. And so what we realize is we can work together to develop approaches, both departures and approaches, that are optimized for these aircraft and the unique flying capabilities that they bring to the table. For example, they can shoot much steeper approaches oftentimes. Sometimes, they can perform, certainly if there's no passengers on board, we can develop instrument approaches that aren't typical, 3-degree, really long straight-in approaches, and really there's a level of creativity that can be brought here to just really optimize the ability of these aircraft to get to where they need to be. Next slide. So this just shows you the first year project, which is indicated in black. I'll talk about the yellow section in just a minute. So this first year project has us cooperating and working closely with the office in FAA, and actually there's multiple offices in the FAA that are focused on AAM. The AUS Office 300 is focused on the research side. The policy and approval sections are offices of flight standards. And so we're working with both of those offices to try and make sure that we're meeting the research objectives that will ensure that we stay directly in line with policy and best inform future needs around advanced air mobility aircraft. So the specific deliverables of this project are to develop and have designated a vertiport at an off-airport vertiport at Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, which is a Virginia Department of Transportation owned property, an on-airport vertiport at the Roanoke Class C airspace, which is a terminal airspace. So the reason that this is a research objective is because there's a tower at this airport, and it will allow for research around how the aircraft are best managed as they're shooting the instrument approaches, coming in and out of when they leave a controller that is in the approach environment and then move into the towered environment. And then we will join this with a network, an instrument approach an instrument route network back to a previously developed vertiport with instrument procedures that already exist at Blackstone, which is in Central Virginia here. And that was part of a project 3 years ago where we worked to do something very similar, but for a smaller. It was done for a drone to be able to fly under instrument procedures in and out of a Class D airspace, so another controlled airspace. Each of these vertiports will have both standard, they'll have instrument departures and they'll have approaches designed for a specific OEM aircraft, but the envelope will be big enough and we will be able to have the performance measured in such a way that we can determine which aircraft can operate within those approaches and departures. The yellow that you see here is just long-term vision. This is not a project that's stood up yet, but we've been in discussions with both NASA Langley and NASA Wallops, and we have a Space Act agreement under which we're working on an annex for a future project to do the same thing, to connect further to the east with some of the vertiport work that's being done there. Next slide. So the real advantage here is that we're not trying to get any approvals that are outside of existing guidelines. So both the FAA Urban Air Mobility Concept of Operations and then the more detailed NASA Urban Air Mobility Airspace Research Roadmap talk about the use of the current infrastructure, digital infrastructure, if you will, instrument support network as an enabler in the early days of advanced air mobility. So by not having to change any, with no expectation of any change in regulations, it allows us to move forward on this. With the past approvals we had at Blackstone, points to a degree of success that we'll be able to achieve here. And then we're really entertaining a lot of questions from different OEMs on how we can best optimize this for their aircraft. And then we expect it to be scalable. We expect these lessons learned as a test site that we're providing back to be able to be expanded to other projects across the country, whether they be led by our team or other teams. And this is my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Tombo. And this is the other crucial part of really, enabling a more integrated solution is to figure out a pathway to really deployment and certification and operationalization of these technologies, right? So let me jump into Q&A. We have about 15 minutes left. So the first question I have, and this is open for all, but more so for Trey and Husni to chime in. I'm curious, how is aviation included today in state level planning when it comes to integrating with other modes? And Husni, based on all the work we've been doing for the past year, what all non-aerospace stakeholders are interested and have shown motivation to really enable this?
Yeah, thank you, Vishwa. I'll just kick it off. I would say that has been increasing over the last few years, at least in Florida, with the investment on the federal and state level. Funding is what drives a lot of that, right? The coordination. And so we've been increasing on both levels, and including on the state level with not just the airports, but also, as I mentioned earlier, our spaceports. And then what's happened is as we are getting into other AAM modes, including eVTOLs and then UAS with the drones, is you're seeing state DOTs, states like Florida, getting more and more involved in that for different use cases. So we have use cases such as freight, medical use cases. There eventually will be passenger, but especially the emergency use cases in Florida have been some of the earliest operations that we've conducted and see working. And when you have that use case, usually that's something that is helps expedite the industry and the operations. So, for example, in Florida, unfortunately, we have a lot of hurricanes. And so when we're responding to hurricanes, the ability to respond with air and with the latest technologies is critical. And so we've seen that kind of open doors that maybe weren't quite as open before and help propel us, into that coordination.
I'd like to add that Virginia and Ohio, maybe a year and a half ago, stood up a multi-state collaborative initiative that has, I think, about 37 states right now that are asking the exact question you just asked us, right? Which is, what can states do to prepare for AAM? And it's a challenge because we have to be really careful, the states do, not to step on the FAA's toes, right? To ensure that they're performing a role that is a role for the state, but also be an enabler, and whether that be involved in helping with different. I don't want to get into some deep some acronyms, but whether it be different NASA-led initiatives that, for example, have outlined some of the things that will support AAM on the ground side, whether it be data management, I'll say, is some things that some of the states are looking at. Certainly, the National Association of State Aviation Officials has taken a role here and has tried to help kind of organize and help states ensure that they're being smart about how they employ and roll this out. It's a challenge. I'm thrilled, though, to see states trying to figure out exactly how they can do that. Certainly when it comes to the vertiports, they have a big role to play there, right? In zoning and understanding the FAA's engineering brief and what the requirements are and how to meet the requirements, and then at the municipality levels, how to help guide those municipalities in approving the zoning portions of those. So, thanks.
So I'll just add quickly a couple of things here. Well, first of all, I really want to commend Florida State. I think is a leader as through our research and outreach. I know through the University of South Florida, integrating aviation into the 4-step planning process, for example, and some really great work there in the Orlando use case. I do want to say that from the outreach that we've been doing, I think besides the use cases, the firefighting or the cargo and such, I think the communities is really an important stakeholder. And so we'll be looking at the problem more of, let's look at the county level, let's talk to the transportation authorities, and let's ask what's really needed in terms of what are the gaps in these transportation. And we've been talking to, for example, the San Francisco Ferry, and the Tri-Delta bus servers and such to see their perspective. I think they're important stakeholders, and there's lots of synergy, for example, between the ferry and the aviation in terms of needing, they don't need as much infrastructure like aviation, and so in terms of finding where the routes that they may expand to and serve. So there's a synergy there between ferry, let's say, and the AAM and such. So I think looking at those other operators and anticipating what the impact of AAM might be, they will really be keen on looking at these. And then the transportation authorities themselves at the local level, multi-county level, as well as the state level, we've been talking with them, and they're stakeholders in the sense that they really want to see the impact on their community. How do we predict Uber? How do we predict the disruptions that happen, with autonomous cars and things? Are the disruptions on the way, and how can we manage them? There's just a few thoughts there.
Let me build upon that, Husni, and sort of kind of combine a few questions here from the audience, also from Jim and I believe Kelly. So we already have a big infrastructure of existing underutilized airports all across the country, a lot in Florida, definitely, where a lot of these fly-in communities exist, and again in Virginia and further on the west here in California. So I'm curious, even before we wait for these new aircraft to come, could we start using these? And what's the roadmap to sort of enabling these underutilized airports to really support a lot of those community use cases? And at the same time, ensure, like Kelly says, safe operation, because we've been seeing a lot of accidents happen recently, and then you bring in these new aircraft. So could we somehow build a roadmap, or is there a way to start off with existing planes, which are already, we know, to some extent, way more safer and tested, and enable a lot of these use cases with existing airports?
Yeah, well, we in Florida, you're right. We have about 575 private use airports, and so what the approach we're taking, it's very early, right? But the approach we're taking is trying to really have a lot of good outreach to our communities and have some guidance on siting vertiports and zoning. And I think what we're going to see is a variety of responses from the communities. Some will not want them, some will be very interested. At least right now, we're talking about eVTOLs, and so that is going to take good power infrastructure, of course. It's good, it takes an enormous amount of electrical power. And then, but the noise, of course, is a lot better. So that's going to be something that's more attractive. But I think you're going to see a real variety, at least from our approach, based on what the communities want. I think the last thing we want to do is try to force vertiports or other infrastructure where a community doesn't want it or isn't interested. I think we have to get some early wins, some early strong partners to make that happen.
I can chime in here with a couple of thoughts. I think, the one common theme across kind of different use cases there is really the underutilized airports and how we can leverage them and create a network of these airports. And I do think that, so eVTOLs and drones and such, but I think even electrified fixed wing, right, the small airplanes that are coming into the mix as well, and these will use runways and such, and then they'll be more clean and more cost effective and such. And so I think, to your point, Vishwa, I think there will be a future where we will see a lot more traffic between these small airports. If autonomy is part of it, the VFR, IFR question comes into play, like Tombo was saying, and so. But I think this is going to bring in the safety issue as well, because these smaller airports are, there are recreational activities, there are VFR, general aviation activities. How do you mix with these? So we can say we will fly IFR, we'll fly under strict procedures, but how we're going to mix with this traffic, which is very chaotic, right? And this is where most of the accidents happen, right? The general aviation safety is where kind of we have is not at par with commercial. And so how do we do the research and understand the behavior around these airports? How do we integrate with it safely? It's going to be a huge area that will remain with us, I think, for a long time. We've been doing some research at NASA along these lines, and and so I think that's going to be really important. Also, the airports, and how do we do we get closer to the bigger airports, or do we remain at smaller airports? But the smaller airports get connected with the other modes. So then you take a train to the big airports, for example. In the New York area, for example, there's the airspace is very congested and stuff. And so can we use the smaller airports, and there are many of them around, to connect these vehicles and then connect with the other modes? And there's trade-off there between how much transfer we do versus getting point to point. But the use of small airports will be very important.
Go ahead, Tombo. You had a comment, but you didn't say something.
I'll just share something, and I'll just kind of echo what Trey suggested. As a test site, before the first Part 135 certification came out for drones deliver packages, Wing had some incredible vision on the importance of community engagement and community buy-in before moving to an aircraft that is advanced and that is not well understood. And we worked hard to try to support them in that role, and did some studies here at Virginia Tech on customer sentiment and did a lot of outreach. But I think the key is to not have the technology roll out ahead of engaging the stakeholders and getting their involvement, because oftentimes they're asking logical questions that can really be, with a little bit of transparency, or I'll say a lot of transparency, with a lot of transparency can really pave the way for a successful rollout of a technology. It just takes a conscious effort. And so I'm just agreeing with Trey that we've seen that on the drone side for sure.
And it seems a good option here is to enable that order of technology coming in after community engagement, is to actually use existing technology and see if some of these use cases can already be enabled, maybe with a Cessna or something, moving people from a very underutilized regional airport, and see, and that gives the community a platform to engage and know what are the issues, what are the problems. At the same time, that helps the new aircraft being developed to sort of cater to these, these obstacles that are identified through actual operation rather than just asking people, right? And that also engages the other stakeholders, like you said, Husni, even before the new technology is ready to be deployed. On that note, let me also ask, I guess, one final question so we can wrap up on time. I I was curious, we often think of adding a new mode in an existing metropolitan, structure. But what ways do you think, where we can think of how regions can evolve structurally to enable a multimodal system where AM can provide value? So instead of integrating an existing structure, can we think of regions in a new way so that AM can be integrated? Or what would, a very simple way of saying is, what would a city look like if it was built for AM to be a part of a multimodal system? Thoughts on that, and then with that, we'll kind of wrap up. Shall I call on someone? Husni, go ahead.
I guess, yeah, we're supposed to think future. I say, well, I don't know the answer to that. I think it's interesting to see that there are lots of clean sheet approaches out there. I think they're useful. I think cities will emerge, and I think, I guess from the examples that I showed, we have to be careful about the how do we proceed and what's the impact of a new mode on the older ones. Like, railway becomes unused, things get disrupted. But I do think it's going to be balanced. I think we need to take the approach that we've been talking about here in terms of assuming the current system and how do we introduce these things in the current system with as minimal changes as possible. I think that approach is needed. But I think we have to be careful also not to tie ourselves too much down with that and think clean sheet as well and see how the two merge together. I do like the approach of thinking of the problems, going to the communities, and thinking about what solutions do we need. We may think of a new type of vehicle altogether. From our perspective at NASA, we're interested in those kind of futures as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Trey, I'm sure Florida has a lot of flying communities, which is sort of a little blueprint for that new way of thinking, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we do, and and I like I mentioned earlier, part of is what's the geography look like? Where are the the population centers, and how's that oriented? But also, I do want to mention, let's don't forget about our rural populations, and which we also have a lot of in Florida, and we don't want this technology to only be for those urban populations. Certainly, it will start there. It's got to be market driven. We believe, and so it will have to start in those urban areas. But I don't want to forget about the potential. It'll have great potential for rural areas as well.
Last thoughts, Tombo, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah, I see we're just slightly over time. I'll just say that certainly in Southwest Virginia here, we have a lot of rural communities, and we looked at some different use cases on maybe a little outside the box thinking on utilizing these type aircraft to actually deliver services to the rural community. So instead of utilizing passenger carrying to move them into bigger urban areas, such as to travel or something of that nature, having daily commutes for doctors to go to rural communities as an example, utilizing an AAM aircraft, and so you're bringing a service to that community utilizing this technology. So I just want to close by saying thank you for having me here today.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I just want to add a couple tag-ins. So this is one of a lot of events as we keep planning and going forward. At Aviation this year in Vegas, we have two big events coming up. One, we have a workshop on fleshing out these use cases further. And the second is a panel on using airports or developing airports as multimodal hubs. So I wanted to do a quick tag in there. Once again, quick thank you to everyone for joining and all the panelists. I'll hand over to Ashira to wrap up and close.
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you all again, both to our incredible panelists and our participants and attendees for joining us today for the AIAA ITSA Partner Webinar on Advanced Air Mobility's Contributions to Multimodal Solutions. We hope you'll join us, as Vishwa said, for one of our organization's summer events. AIAA will hold Aviation 2025 in July in Las Vegas, and ITS America will hold its 2025 World Congress in Atlanta in August. If you have feedback on this program think our next to last slide is contact details for each of our teams. For AIAA, it would be Jim Sherman and myself. And for ITS America, Morgan Fincher and Aaron Banton. We're so appreciative that you joined. We really welcome your feedback and, would love to do more things like this. So with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will now end the recording. Be well.
Thank you, Ashira. Thank you. Pleasure to be with everyone.
Thank you, Ashira.